noises that you get like right after you eat, where you're like, man,
Oh,
like,
dude, yeah. Like,
did it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Just Pick Something podcast, where we discuss movies, TV shows, both recent and old.
and this time we're going to talk about Peacemaker Season 1.
Yeah, it was created by James Gunn, stars John Cena, and you can, at the time of recording, you can watch it on HBO Max.
And since this is going to be probably kind of fun, since this is the first TV show we are going to be discussing for this podcast, and if anything, it seems to be doing pretty well on HBO Max. Like, I keep seeing YouTube videos pop up with like Peacemaker is dope. This show kind of took me by surprise a little bit.
So I think they said that this show has the highest viewing count for any series that premiered on HBO Max. I don't really know what that means in regards to like,
Wow, really?
yeah. So I don't know how many shows have been released on HBO Max.
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, but James Gunn was like, oh yeah, did the best. I know they announced a season 2 already.
Yeah.
It was funny coming into this show because I was hyped. Because I liked the Suicide Squad from last year.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I knew that they were doing a Peacemaker show. I loved that movie. So coming into this, I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. I remember a lot of people that I was friends with were like, I don't want to watch something about Peacemaker. I hate Peacemaker. What he did in the movie, spoiler alert if anybody hasn't watched the movie.
Oh yeah, I guess spoiler alert for Peacemaker Season 1 and also the Suicide Squad movie from 2021. Is that when it came out last year, right?
Yes, last year. So, they're like, he killed Rick Flag. I hate Peacemaker. He's the worst. And I was like, I don't know why people like want to like get real attached to like the actions of characters when there's going to be like a bunch of more story to them. I was like, guys, I bet you $100 that you are going to love this show based off of how you liked the movie. And they're like, no, I can't get excited about him. He killed Rick Flag and I hate him. And then I really should message all those people and be like, yo, you owe me $100.
It's like I told you so.
It was like, I swear every week it was like, oh my God, I love Peacemaker. Peacemaker is the best comic book show I've ever watched. And I was like, I told you guys would like it, and y'all were like, but he killed Rick Flag. And I was like, yeah, he cries about it too.
That's true. Well, I mean, the thing about the Suicide Squad movie that came out last year, I wasn't like, super against Peacemaker or super a fan of him from that movie. I liked that movie. It was a lot of fun. And when they announced the Peacemaker show, I was just kind of like, wow, really? Peacemaker? That's the character they're spinning off? That's kind of interesting. I really thought there was going to be someone like the Ratcatcher or, Amanda Waller or something, but like Peacemaker should be interesting. And lo and behold, season 1 turned out to be kind of fun.
From that cast of characters, I feel like the ones that make sense to do a show about would be Peacemaker or Bloodshot.
Was it Bloodsport or Bloodshot?
Bloodsport.
Okay.
Yeah, that's because everybody thought he was going to be Deadshot. Way too
right,
close.
right. See, I thought it was going to be like the Bronze Tiger or something.
Oh, when they announced him, that would have been dope. I would have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, but I mean, still was a pretty good performance from Idris Elba. I really liked him.
Yeah, if anybody was going to get a TV show out of it, I was expecting him. But Peacemaker makes sense to me because John Cena is pretty big right now, and he seems like the character with like the most places to go out of them.
Yeah, that does make sense considering, I guess, in that movie, Ratcatcher kind of did have an arc, and Peacemaker's arc had just started.
Yeah, it was cool to see that come to fruition here. But yeah, no. So overall, what did you think of the show?
First of all, I think we should probably talk about the intro sequence to the show, right? I think that was pretty hot for like the first 2 or 3 weeks when the show was airing. I saw a bunch of things of the intro sequence, which was pretty good. I ended up like downloading that song on Spotify and listening it to a few times. And it kind of just ties to that whole like James Gunn music taste that he has.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I guess I should have seen that coming, that something like this was going to be in his show. The faces they made playing it straight, like the goofy choreography, and even the whole intro sequence with all the dance moves and all the characters coming in, big and small. It was like kind of fun.
Yeah, no, someone had posted it online, so I watched it before I got to see it on the show. And so when I watched the sequence, I was like, that's not really what they did, is it? And lo and behold, it was. And I was like, oh man, I love this. This is like my favorite opening sequence. If you're talking about, we're in an era where all the opening sequences for like streaming services are those like the Daredevils and Arcane like style, like, oh, they're like statuesque, like slow moving camera over silhouettes of buildings and figures in
Yeah.
darkness. And it's like Peacemaker's like, nah, we're gonna do a dance sequence. And I was like, yo, what the heck?
Yeah, man. Like, it's one of those things that I'm kind of happy streaming shows and like I guess media at large is kind of adopting. It's a thing that I thought for a while was missing from American-based shows. Anime, right? One of the main things that people really enjoy is the opening theme song, right? Like the opening credits.
Yeah.
And for a while, at least growing up, some shows didn't really go all out. Sometimes they had it, sometimes it was long, sometimes you could see like an extended cut. And I feel like with streaming, that kind of came back a bit. HBO shows, they have them all the time now, like Game of Thrones, Westworld. Foundation has like a really artistic, cool opening sequence. And then we have Peacemaker with some fun dance moves and, Wigwam's Wigwam's song. Even the eagle at the end where they just fly in. Man, talk about like pretty solid opening for this show that we're talking about
Yeah,
today.
no, it was hilarious because I love the opening sequence. And when the first episode hit, I was watching it with my wife, and she was watching it just like her mouth just like wide open, like, why the heck are they doing this? It is so dumb. And I was like,
I'm
no, it's great. I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, no, this is stupid. Why are we watching this still?
Dude, I get it. I told after watching on my own, I ran over to like Maya. I'm like, hey, when you get a second, Maya, I have to show you this intro for this song. Like this show is fucking like crazy. It's just weird and like wacky. And I think it actually does a pretty good job of giving you an idea for the tone of the show. The main characters are super serious throughout because they're like going through the motions of this villainous threat, and everything around them is just kind of like absurd and wacky and strange and humorous. So I guess going into the first few episodes, they released the first three, and then the fourth one came out after the first week. What did you think about, the first batch of episodes? John Cena, being in the hospital and then leaving the hospital, and Hardcore and Economos showing up. The introduction of, I guess, Amanda Waller's daughter, which I think was a show original character. I don't think that's a person in the comics, is it?
No, it's not. So they added Adebayo, yeah, 100%. And I think Myrn is also a brand new character. And obviously the main conflict,
Okay.
the butterflies, they're also entirely show
All
based.
right, because I knew some characters were comic sourced, like Vigilante.
Vigilante and Hardcore, I think, are like and like obviously Amanda Waller are like the ones that are 100% from the comic. So is White Dragon, but I don't think he's
Yeah, White Dragon is I think he's a little different.
he's very much a supervillain still. I don't think he's related to Peacemaker at all. And then Judo Master is also a comic book character, but
Oh, really? That's kind of surprising. I didn't expect that. That seems like a very James Gunn character.
I mean, everybody's like crazy different, regardless. Like even if they are like they have the same names as like the people from the comics, like Vigilante as a comic book character is an entirely different type of character than the one that we get in the show. Like the one in the show, you would argue is like Deadpool esque.
Yeah, dude, I loved Vigilante in the show. He was hilarious. I thought he was a great like character.
Like by far my favorite. So but in the comics, he's like, oh yeah, super hard boiled. Yo, okay, this is an entirely different character. And
Wow, really?
yeah, and Peacemaker's not as exaggerated, so he's not like as dumb feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a little bit about Peacemaker beforehand because I knew that the Watchmen characters were based off some of the characters from Charleston comics.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Peacemaker is one of those characters. I think it's the comedian that was based off of Peacemaker, right?
Yes. So he's very different in the comics as well. And it's funny because the only reason I know anything about Peacemaker is because he is a semi-regular side character in Jaime Reyes' The Blue Beetle story when he first debuted as a superhero, which is cool because they're coming out with the Blue Beetle movie.
Oh,
I
cool.
can't remember why exactly off the top of my head, but Jaime Reyes has to do with alien invasions, and I highly doubt they're ever going to cross paths, but I wouldn't complain.
That would make a lot of sense if they introduced another character like that in season 2, especially the bug theme, the Blue Beetle, the butterflies.
Yeah, so I mean, with this movie coming out, and the guy who plays Blue Beetle is already on Cobra Kai, So maybe he's willing to do another TV show. We don't know.
Oh, is that who they cast? Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
they cast the main Cobra Kai kid. I was talking with someone about it, and it's funny that, and this is the only character that is consistent through from their comic book version to this is Amanda Waller, and how I absolutely hate that woman with all of my heart.
Oh, dude, she sucks. But man, Viola Davis does such a good job portraying her. Like,
Yeah, I was like,
talk about perfect casting. God, she's so horrible. And they nail it with her tone and attitude towards like everything. You know, USA first.
yeah, it's funny because the two main villains of the show are the Butterfly Invasion and the White Dragon, Peacemaker's dad, and his personal conflict on that end, right?
Hmm.
When the show ended, and it ends with Adebayo being like, "Yo, Task Force X."
Task Force X. Task Force. That is not an easy.
Yeah, the Suicide Squad. There you
Yeah.
go. That exists. No wonder they.
No wonder people say the Suicide Squad. It's just easier. Like rolls off the tongue way easier.
So them exposing that, and I was like, "Yo, how the heck are they gonna do that moving forward?" But regardless, I was funny because when that happened, I thought about the show in general, and I was like, "Yo, yeah, 100% White Dragon and the Butterflies were bad guys." But if you really think about it, if you could argue very easily that Amanda Waller is the third main antagonist of that show.
Yeah, I think that's easy to say that she is because she usually has that role in Amanda Waller plots, right?
When a good Amanda Waller story is like she's never the outright, she's not like a threat, but when she's written really well, it's like, yeah, cool. There totally was this huge, overwhelming, dire situation that we had to deal with. Yo, Amanda Waller, you suck.
I mean, speaking about the villains in the show, right? It was pretty clever of them to make both Amanda Waller awful and then also manipulating her daughter a bit. And then the White Dragon, if you're going to make a character be sympathetic, having their father be a horrible racist monster is a pretty easy way to make someone a little bit sympathetic, right? Like,
Yeah,
you're not exactly going to be like, oh, that Peacemaker, I still hate him because, despite his horrible upbringing, I get it now, right?
yeah.
Especially because, his father, aside just from being the White Dragon, is being played by Robert Patrick, the Terminator, right? like, talk about intimidating.
Yeah, no, this show had great casting. I think everybody was really good. But it is interesting because, yeah, again, people didn't like Peacemaker because he killed Rick Flag, and so to immediately be like, all right, cool. What are the reasons you wouldn't like Peacemaker? All right, cool. So he killed Rick Flag. He's probably racist, probably sexist, probably a bunch of other things that you could think of off the top of my head. And they immediately addressed that beginning of the show. They're like, you're that racist superhero, and they're like, you disproportionately kill minorities. It's like, all right, cool. I'll kill more white people. And I was just there dying.
Yeah, it was really funny. And as the show goes on, we definitely get an insight to like why he's this way.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job of making him seem sympathetic, even though it took a while to get going, his brother, his horrible father, like, being in prison, put on these missions, and like all the list of things go on for why you feel just so sad for this guy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that they tell the story, though, where it is obviously called Peacemaker, right? But like you said, like they don't exactly like jump right into like redeeming him. They kind of just explain how the character is, why he is, and kind of, hey, we're not excusing his actions, and he's not even excusing his actions really. But because you can watch this show and you can like get a handle on the people around him and how he treats them and how they treat him, you get like this fuller picture of them as people, right?
Yeah, I mean, they do a pretty good job of delving into the characters over time. Adebayo's character, Economos, even like, hardcore and vigilante, like the writing kind of shows you why they are the way they are.
Yeah, and so I think they did a really good job of blending the story in regards to, hey, this is a murderer and he is kind of a psychopath, but at the end of the day, you can understand where he's coming from. Not necessarily, again, like you don't agree with it, but it's like, okay, cool, I get it. Why he killed Rick Flag and what that means to him as a person moving forward and all that stuff. I thought that it's super interesting because I keep on going back to that is such a major point of his character in this show when it's like you wouldn't expect for a character who has been like his backstory to be what it is for it to be like, all right, cool, you remember the events of the movie that you watched before this? All right, cool. That's fundamentally driving the character's arc in the show. And I'm like, oh my god, like I would have thought it would have been like something show where like, they introduce something in the show that drives his character to go down a certain path. But it's like, no, like you saw what put him on this path, and that will fundamentally structure what's going on.
Yeah, and they do a pretty good job of kind of making it feel like the events of this show are taking place very close to when the movie happened. They put in that brief flashback, or I guess primer for the movie at the beginning of like episode one. And then as he's kind of traumatized by killing Rick Flag and thinking back to the events, it's interesting to see that the things that are haunting him are more Rick Flag and what he's been doing versus the events of the movie, like the starfish. If anything, I kind of wish that we got a glimpse into him, remembering maybe one of the characters from the movie a little bit more fondly. I know he had a connection with Rick Flag, and the death impacted him quite heavily. Like I wish the trauma, or I guess the remembrance of the movie, was a little bit more incorporated into the show to show that it's not just Rick Flag, but it's a little bit of the events of that movie and also his childhood that kind of impacted him. But overall, still pretty good and well handled.
Yeah, well, I think what the reason they didn't do that, because they briefly talk about Bloodsport and how he was as how they had a sort of relationship in the movie. But I think why they chose not to really focus on the movie too much is, well, again, like Peacemaker didn't do a whole ton in that movie, right? In regards to like what would actually impact him. But you can see, I think the reason that they focus on the Rick Flag moment so much is that is his key moment in that film, right? And it does go into the narrative of what his arc in regards to like his vow and how he's going to go about that and what it means to have the kind of vow he had, where it's like, yeah, cool, like mentioning, that he knew King Shark and Bloodsport is one thing, but on the other hand, it's like, hey, the vow you decided to take and the way that you've been going about your life directly impacted this very specific moment, which is killing Rick Flag, because he's like, I'm willing to kill anyone. And he realizes after that moment, hey, maybe this is like not the right thing to do, right? It's interesting how that's also reflected through the butterfly. But before we get to that, because this is 8 episodes long, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot like in these 8 episodes. I mean, we didn't really even talk about two of the other kind of main characters, like, or secondary characters, like the police officers. Like, there's quite a bit in these 8 episodes, like packed in.
Yeah, so what I was going to say was like it was interesting watching it week to week for me, because I know I'm sure people will watch it like all in one go or whatever, but watching it week to week, there were weeks where I came out of the episode being like, this was a good episode, but I have no idea where this is headed. Why are these police officers here? Why do we need them? Like,
Hmm.
why, like, what are they going to do with the dad? Like, obviously they're kind of setting up a fight because they mention how his armor works, but like, why, like, what are the butterflies? You don't even learn what they are, I think, till like episode 5 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the bigger faults or issues with this season is that it feels like the main threat, other than, White Dragon being kind of an obvious, like, oh yeah, they're going to be probably confronting him near the end. It's just feeling like it dragged on a bit in the beginning, and the main threat should have probably been incorporated a little bit sooner.
Oh, well, I don't necessarily think that we needed to know exactly what it was earlier on, because, for example, right, I didn't know what Amanda Waller's endgame was, right? That was a mystery for the whole time, like for like almost the entirety of the show, was why she wanted Adebayo to plant the journal, what it meant,
Hmm.
but like, and why she would be willing to kind of throw the team under the bus. Like, I was interested in that's something we don't learn, and we don't learn what the butterflies are. Like, really, really know what the butterflies are until later on. I don't think that's necessarily a flaw in the show. They're not really what it's about, if that makes
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
where it's like it's clearly about like learning about these characters and like why and their interactions and like getting to know them.
Yeah, well, it's more that I guess my thoughts about it as a whole are probably a little scattered about the first 3 episodes because I watched them all at once.
Like, I don't think the show's perfect. Like don't get me wrong. I think it's really good. I think there's a lot of extra praise heaped on it than I would personally give it.
Well, like, what's something you didn't really like about it? Because I mean, other than what I just said, something for me that kind of was a miss for me was some of the humor.
Yeah.
Like some of the physical comedy was great, but for me, some of the humor kind of felt a little flat. When mostly Peacemaker's jokes about like everyone around them a bit, like I felt like it was kind of set up to be jokes that were him overcompensating for being insecure about himself or things at large.
Yeah.
But they kind of felt a little flat. They felt a little forced to me, as in like I get what they're going for, but like Economos and the beard thing, like that didn't really hit for me.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that didn't work for me the most, and I don't usually agree with this kind of criticism. I think it's pretty lazy, but it was one of the things where I was like, man, they use a lot of language,
Oh yeah.
like like every other word, man. Like it, usually that doesn't bother me. Like I'm perfectly okay with people cussing. Like it's an expletive, it doesn't really make a difference to me. But I was like, man,
Mhm.
like a lot of this dialogue is heavily centered on the cursing.
Okay, I guess that's true. And I'm like, man, this show is unexpectedly obscene in like certain ways. Because
Yeah.
like, yeah, there is moments where you're just like, whoa, that was a okay, that's the choice, you know?
Yeah, so that's one of the things. I don't typically give much weight to those kind of criticisms though, because it's just like it's kind of like really surface level and it's kind of like a personal taste thing. I just thought it was something worth noting where it's like, man, like they the language just relies on that very heavily. And if that's not your cup of tea, that's not your cup of tea.
Yeah, I think they do say like dicks and fuck and other things like that a lot.
Well, but I think that does. I guess that goes in line with the kind of characters that he's writing, right? Because, like you said, like you didn't like the diebeard jokes and all the really bad humor from Peacemaker, and I'm like, I think it was intentionally written to be like, this guy's kind of like a really immature asshole.
Yeah, I like I said, I feel like it was probably intentional because he had some pretty major trauma early in life. So it's kind of like he didn't really get to grow up to be a functional adult.
Yeah,
And I mean, I get that. So like it's not crazy to expect that this guy would be the most well spoken or like nicely mannered person, right?
yeah, especially with his dad.
Oh man, his dad is like oh my god, talk about like the worst upbringing ever. And man, his dad was such a weird influence on his life aside from the racism and violence. Like why does White Dragon have somehow knowledge of extra dimensional tech that allows him to have a huge warehouse in his house?
Yeah, okay, so
You
yeah,
know?
my question is like, yeah, exactly. This guy was living in a trailer park and having his kids beat each other up for money, and now you're gonna tell me that this man can like make fourth dimensional closets and like build human torpedo helmets.
Yeah, and like make suits that have flying capabilities and sonar and like explosive sonic blast and stuff. Like I didn't expect him to be dumb, but I didn't expect him to have this level of technological prowess, you know? Like
Yeah, it's a little. It's a that's the only part that I was like, when typically I'm like trying to think of things to criticize with the show. It is like there's like a little flimsiness in the logic of certain things, and like how like the writing doesn't seem as cohesive as it could be in regards to like what you're trying to get across.
well, yeah, but like at the same time, it's like what could have gotten him to this point where he knows this stuff? Like you know how sometimes on a TV show with superheroes and things, right? There's usually someone behind the tech, right? Like you have a tech guy, or in James Bond, you have Q, and there's always someone in charge of the tech. So like, do you think they just let him have that capability because they're like, well, do we really want to introduce maybe like a white supremacist tech guy? I mean, I don't know. It's just like, what do you do with how do you naturally give that character that other than just being like, yeah, I guess he kind of just knows it, you
I
know?
mean, I guess it's a kind of a an interesting subversion on like that archetype, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, no, he's a white supremacist. So you're thinking like, oh my god, he's from the down south from the trailer park and he's dumb and he's a stupid white supremacist. And I'm like, okay, so like, yeah, that's typically what you would get. But instead, it's like, no,
Yeah, they do play that archetype pretty high in some
yeah. And
shows.
so now they're like, no, this guy's like incredibly smart. He's
Hmm.
and like incredibly capable, and he's just a white supremacist as well. And it's like, yo, I freaking hate this guy.
Yeah, yeah. Like his neighbor, it like hates Chris, and like so those were some pretty funny scenes, ragging on him about being a lesser superhero, and then Vigilante being like, dude, your dad sucks. I want to be your friend, but like I'm starting to hang out with you, and people say you're racist. So people are gonna say that I'm racist and I'm not racist. And some of those moments were pretty funny.
Yeah. Oh, like so. Move forward, like Vigilante and the prison scene, where he's like, he confronts all the white supremacists. He's like, "What is your favorite addition to American culture from the black community?" And I was like, "Oh my god, this was."
Oh, and he does not hold back. He just goes on, and like you're just waiting for that shoe to drop. And especially with that whole intro walk where he was just, walking through those like that's crowded corridor of people yelling at him with that song Jawbreaker playing in the background. Man, that whole moment was like absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, so it's but
Like, what did you think about the police officers? Because, like, I like them, like their performances as, those characters being, related to the story, but coming in it from the side and like trying to figure things out. And I was kind of surprised they ended up becoming a part of the main threat.
yeah, actually, that was my main issue with this. Was I was like, why the police officers are pointless? Like I yes, I like the woman. I can't remember her name.
Detective Sophie Song.
The detective, I liked her because she had the funny interactions with Peacemaker's dad, right? Where he was like,
Mhm.
"Ah, yeah, it's was it Lucy Liu?"
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, Lucy Liu, and just
And
all kinds of shit against her.
And she was like, is it really just because I'm Asian? I'm an Asian woman. That's all you got. And then she has like the little thing where she's like, all right, cool, whatever, Brad Paisley, whatever,
Milk
Elvis
toast
Presley.
or
Just naming a bunch of white
yeah.
celebrities. And I was like, oh my god, this is hilarious. But it was regardless of if she's funny and I like seeing her around.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh shit," because I really thought they were gonna try to incorporate the white dragon and the aliens in like a pretty expected way of like the alien or the butterfly finds a way to get inside of the white dragon. So now the white dragon and his white supremacist goons are like being powered by these alien butterfly creatures, and they're gonna be having this huge showdown at the end of the show or
Yeah,
something.
which is funny because they still kind of do that.
They still kind of do that, but just in an unexpected way, by killing the cop and the entire police force and
Yeah,
stuff.
which is why, like what I was saying earlier, like I could not guess where this show was going. That's not, and to me personally, that's not a bad thing because I have a pretty good record of guessing where movies are going. So when I was watching this, I was like, yo, like it does a good job either subverting expectations or hiding certain pieces of information from me to the point where I cannot guess these characters, at least the bad guys next
Yeah,
movie.
that's true. I was pleasantly surprised, or I was happy that I was still trying to figure out what the show was going for. Like it's nice when a show manages to keep you on your toes a bit.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, okay, this is pretty interesting in regards to like how we're gonna do this. And it's a basic invasion plot, right, for the butterflies. Like that's their main thing. Was like, well, yeah, at least that's what it comes across as, right? Mern describes it as basically like, hey, they want to take over everybody.
Yeah, they're doing a like quiet invasion, slowly taking over the citizens of the country and taking over their bodies and or assuming people of political influence and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So based off his description, it's like, okay, like this is very much a typical invasion story.
Mhm.
And to then have that subverted in the last episode to be like, hey, no, it is yeah, 100% we are technically invading you guys, but it's very much they view it as an act of altruism, right? Like it's very
Yeah, yeah.
clearly a parallel to Peacemaker's vow that he's
Mhm.
made, right?
Yeah.
So it was one of the things where I was like, I was not expecting that because I just took what Mern told me on face value and was like, yeah, no, these guys are
I
terrible.
mean, at that point in the story, we don't have any other reason to not believe Myrna at face value, right? And then at the same time, when we get that ending explanation of it being kind of like Peacemaker, running parallel to his character, it's a pretty classic, alien invasion story. And the two ways that could go near the end would be like, oh, yeah, they're classic aliens. You defeat the threat, the world is safe, aliens threat is gone. Or, oh, they actually were trying to help us all along. And I don't know. I feel like I kind of wanted something more, I don't know, nuanced or interesting or a different take on like the alien invasion
Well,
thing.
I think I agree with that for the most part. I think it works a little bit better than most other examples, based purely on the fact that it does have an emotional crux to it in our main character, right? Where in a lot of those other stories, we don't have a peacemaker type character in all those other stories where they have this vow to like, oh, in the regard for the better good of everybody, I'm going to do this. So like Peacemaker was going through this journey throughout this entire show, and then the final conflict being like these people are like, look, I'm not trying to fight you. Like, I'm literally asking for your help to help everybody else. Like, you're a superhero. We understand what your purpose is, and we're not trying to be in conflict with you. And for me, half of me was like, are they trying to like pull a fast one? And like, are they lying? Because clearly they're like aggressive and willing to kill people. But then on top of it's like also that's 100% a plea that our main character would listen to. Typically in a lot of these stories, they would be like, oh, you're just a misunderstood alien. Like we can work on this, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And in this show, they were like, "No, like I'm not going to accept this," and he kills them anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, which was cool. I really liked that he just committed and was like, no, bam, their whole thing brought to an end, right? I guess for me, aliens in media, they're always either going to represent something or they're going to be used in a certain way to kind of aid the plot of the story. Like sometimes aliens could be an immigrant story, or like in the anime Parasite, the soft invasion that happens in that one, and aliens being a vehicle to explore the ideas of like humanity and sentience and stuff. And with aliens in general, right, it's always so much room to do interesting things. So for them to use the aliens in this show as kind of just like I don't know, just an okay threat was just kind of like, well, that's not too bad. But I kind of wish there was maybe just a third force that were trying to work for a middle ground and being like, hey, we agree that you guys are doing a shit job of saving the planet, but we also like feel everything that a human experiences, because when we take over their body, we're left with their memories and stuff. Even Mern is kind of played to be like just the sole detractor, right? So I kind of wish like maybe we had a cool reveal, I just kind of wanted a little something else.
So yeah, I think the only issue that I could really say that I personally had was because aliens are typically always a stand-in for like immigrants. When you have your two sets of main bad guys, one of them are white supremacists, and the other one are a group of people usually used as a stand-in for immigrants. And they're both bad guys.
Yeah.
They're aliens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but then it's also like, okay, yeah, cool. When they explain, okay, well, we came from a dying planet. Basically, they're like, yo, we're refugees and we're trying to make sure that your planet doesn't end up like ours did. And so it's like,
Yeah.
so you're saying the bad guys were evil refugees and the other people were white supremacists who say that refugees are evil.
And it's pretty funny, but like, God, do I just wish there wasn't the one not evil refugee who just wants to be there and live and thrive and survive and not have like this crazy ulterior motive or going against their culture. I don't know, man. And that's, as you said that and explained that, it's probably better says why I was kind of let down a little bit by the alien subplot.
Like, if it was more of like, yo, like we took over these people because if we don't, we're gonna die outside of them or something like that. And it's like, this is a necessity, not necessarily like a want. And if they didn't take over all the cops, or if they did, and their whole thing was like, no, you don't understand. The people we take over, we know that they, this entire police department was corrupt. They would kill people and illicit and support the drug trade, and like they were doing all these other things and brutalizing people. And all the politicians that we go over, they were also all like corrupt and taking bribes from these other people, destroying the planet, yada yada, blah blah blah. And it's like like it's not gonna make it like absolve them, right? But adding a level of altruism that wasn't there, other than we're willing to murder anyone so that we can save this planet, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even in like the Suicide Squad movie, right? You weren't exactly happy that this group of Task Force X or the Suicide Squad was going into this country and murdering like, freedom fighter people against like a corrupt government, right?
Yeah, like we don't appreciate that.
Yeah, right? Like at least for me, I wish that the US government was played up a little bit more. That's what Amanda Waller is. She's being a substitute for the ruthlessness of the United States government, right?
Yeah, so I think where the show fails is in like the nuance of like a larger topic. But I think the main place where it works, right? The main thing that like I think this show deserves a lot of the praise it does get is that you do get some really great character work in pretty much everybody, right? For the most part, you get, like, for example, we haven't talked about Harcourt and Economos too much.
Oh, dude, they great. I loved the scenes they were in. They were so funny together, acting off of each other, and also the group as a whole. The whole Economos being super into that one specific band, and also being like, maybe not the most athletic member of the team, but it's still coming through in the end.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting that like to see that, like, for example, Peacemaker sings like, oh, I don't have friends, and like Economos being like, I hate these guys. And then you see that like divide being filled because you realize that, like, oh, just because I think you're an asshole doesn't mean that like there aren't things that we can get along about. And then Peacemaker being like, I don't need to be an asshole, and there are things that me and him could be like, we can be friends, and realizing that.
Yeah, yeah, the bonding was really nice.
And then oh my god, the end in the last episode with the dye beard reveal where he does dye his beard and he's like,
God, that was so sad. I felt so sympathetic towards him.
I was like, oh my god, I didn't know. I was gonna start getting real emotional about someone's grooming.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Talking about like before I guess we talk about the end, there was some things I do want to acknowledge that made me really die laughing, which was I think some of just the well-placed timing of some of the like humor.
Yeah.
For example, there was one scene near the end where they were at the veterinarian office and they were all like they had their like rousing speech of being like, we're gonna do this together and hardcore's become the new leader, right?
Yeah.
And they're all like ready, and then we see those vets just somehow not tied up with the gun being like ready, and they just look at them like, what the fuck are you doing? You're veterinarians, you know?
No, yeah, 100%. I loved that bit. It was great.
Yeah. Or like some of the callbacks were good. The whole Eagly, I loved Eagly just being a CGI character and being great throughout this show. Like the callback to Eagly giving him a hug, you know, in the veterinarian office.
How do you know it wasn't a sign to leave?
Eagly just, you know, kind of understanding Peacemaker, then also not understanding him, is doing whatever they wanted and stuff. It was great.
Yeah, no, I think the show works on a much smaller scale in terms of its writing. I think, like, yeah, again, character interactions I think really work. The way they build characters throughout and let them like grow and evolve and like let you as an audience member like grow sympathetic. I think in that area it works really well. And building to the final conflict with both the white dragons and the butterflies, it was interesting to see that like build up for like how we were gonna get there and seeing those like dominoes fall into place. And the 7th episode, he does kill his dad.
Yeah, I'm really happy that he was the one that managed to kill his father. You know, it was very satisfying for his character arc to make that choice.
It would have been really messed up if it was Vigilante. I would have gotten so mad about that.
Yeah, and he definitely could have played it for laughs, like him killing him and then being like, What? He was gonna kill you. I saved your life. I thought that was the right thing to do or something like that. But no, I'm glad they gave him the shot. His father was left in shock and awe. So, and then still kind of haunts him anyways, though, you know?
Oh man, yeah, that's rough. Like knowing that the character was like, yeah, I'm finally gonna be able to move on and grow. And his dad's like, no, you're not. I'm still gonna be here.
That was really sad, but it is a little nice to see him that like, killing his father isn't gonna immediately resolve his trauma. It's gonna be something he's gonna have to work on for like quite a while,
So yeah, in the last episode they fight the butterflies. I thought it was hilarious, and I didn't think about it until you mentioned the anime openings earlier. But depending on how many animes you watch, it's always kind of like a small joke where it's like it's gonna get real when the opening song is used in a fight scene.
Dude, you're right. Yeah.
and so he pulls, he plays the opening song for the final fight, and I'm like, oh my god, it's an anime.
Yeah, that was very much an anime moment. The thing that was nice about it is they didn't exactly, win. Like they did a good job taking out the threat, but man, did they get hit hard.
Yeah.
Also, I guess to briefly bring this up, I was dying laughing when they had that brief moment of Adebayo's character being like, I was made for this, and running to like join or help Peacemaker out, and then Economos going after and just immediately breaking his leg, just jumping the fence to be like, just to show that he is not made for this. And he was just like, what the fuck? And he crawls somehow his way to like the main group and just gives her that helmet. God, that was so funny for me.
I was like, oh my god, like even at the last, it was like, we can't count on Economos, and he's like, no, you can totally count on me. And then he's like, immediately breaks leg.
Got him screaming, just what the fuck, what the hell? It was just so funny. It was so brutal, like that. It wasn't just his leg broke, like his bones was showing.
Oh, terrible.
It was very gruesome. But it was so funny, just that onward like over exaggeration. And not to mention, like, he even had that nice callback a little bit before where he was just like infiltrating the main facility with the cow, and we get to see that really gorgeous and like surreal moment of seeing the cow, the giant caterpillar monster thing, and him being like, oh god, no kaijus. I said no kaijus. And he just kind of backtracks and like bails.
Well, yeah, which is funny. They mentioned it very early on that it was, oh, you guys aren't really, clever when you're naming things. Starfish was a giant starfish. It was like butterflies. It can be like a monster or whatever. And it's like, no, but it still is about things that look like butterflies.
Yeah.
Right? It's still just as unoriginal when you think about it.
Yeah, it was, but also like I really liked that specific episode left off with that reveal. It was so gross and eye-catching and interesting to look at. It felt like my brain for a moment was just, what am I looking at, this huge pound of flesh thing with multiple eyes just kind of wincing or being like, ugh, ugh. It really helped to feel the like kind of play up the sci-fi aspect of this show.
Yeah, no, I very much liked how the show looked in general as well, like visually. I think the effects and like the costuming stuff was really good. I didn't like Judo Master too much, but his costume at least. But for the most part, everybody I thought was like, oh, the effects are really good. There's that beautiful shot where the detective, after she's taken over by the butterfly, when she's like being followed by all the other ones, I was like, man, these shots are really well done.
Yeah, not to mention that like moment when they're all converted police officers are walking down the hallway and they are like struggling to figure out how to move their mouth muscles, and it's just that unsettling smile. Ugh.
Oh man, that was so unsettling. But yeah, so everything. Man, okay. So after everything's said and done, they did something that I've been asking for both Suicide Squad movies. This is literally something I personally asked for from the first Suicide Squad movie and the most recent one. I was like, every time I watched one of the movies, I was like, oh man, like it was good. I enjoyed it or whatever. The first one, I was like, it's. I had a fun time. It's not going to pretend like it's a great movie or whatever. But wouldn't it have been cool if the Suicide Squad was ultimately like entirely pointless, and at the end of the day, the Justice League shows up?
Dude, I knew that was coming. I knew you were going to bring up the Justice League because I was like waiting for it.
So yeah, but like it was always my thing. I was like, okay, so in the first one, right? First one has to do with Enchantress and like big demon thing or portal to another world, and like Amanda Waller's like, your mission is to do this one thing, and you find out the mission is to save her.
Yeah.
And I would have been like, it would have been really cool if it was like a really big like climactic moment to go and get her, and then you just like end on this note that is like, yo, we hate Amanda Waller because we risked our life to save this woman. We're not even doing anything about that thing over there. And then she's like, I don't care about that thing over there. Let them deal with it. And then the Justice League shows up. And it's like the Suicide Squad is literally like this like nobody ragtag team, right? And then in the second movie, I was expecting them to do that with when Starro showed up, and they're like, we're gonna have to fight that? And it's like, no, you just run away. And then like Green Lantern shows up and starts fighting Starro. And I was like, that would have been great. I made that joke / recommendation for years. So to see them show up at the end of the fight and be like, yo, you guys are a bunch of dickheads.
Yeah, and they also paid off the whole weird rumor thing that Peacemaker was just spreading and being like, yeah, I heard this Justice League member does this. I heard this superhero member does this. For the Flash to be like, oh no, one of those is true. And then Aquaman or Jason Momoa to be like, I hate that fucking rumor that I was like, wow, I can't believe they actually were able to get this cameo and also acknowledge those like ongoing jokes or something.
Yeah, no, I thought it was because, earlier in the episode, they make the Green Arrow joke where he goes to brony conventions to do, furry stuff. And he's like, no, like, what? This is obviously a lie. He's like, no, I actually heard that one was true. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, how are you going to do Green Arrow like that, man?
But also, it was hilarious because people were like, oh man, I can't believe they keep on making this joke, and they confirmed that he has sex with fish. And I was like, first off, no, they didn't.
They didn't.
Barry was very clearly messing with him. But two, like, yo, lighten up. It's literally just a joke.
Yeah, it was very clearly played for laughs.
Yeah, and it works for him, right? It works for this show. Like, it works in, like, Peacemaker, and then it works in Harley Quinn, where they also make similar types of...
Yeah, and I mean, also, Jason Momoa, like, his whole character, at least his Aquaman, can take a joke, so it's still pretty funny.
And this is a fun interaction. And so, man, I was so happy when that happened. It's not even a lot. People were like, they didn't even really do anything. They only got 2 people to show up. And I'm like, cool. Those 2 people showing up was just so much fun,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I think it was great to see those people show up because it's just a cameo, right? It's not like
Yeah, like Stan Lee showing up in like a fucking Marvel movie.
it's just a fun addition.
Yeah.
And it was funny. It does make me wonder, like, after that cameo, because the show ended where it did with they saved the day, they got hurt, but they're going to be fine. And then Adebayo's character kind of goes on TV and lets the entire nation know what happened and what the Suicide Squad is and stuff, which was a weird and interesting choice that I didn't think was going to happen. It felt a little naive that her character was just like, this is the right thing to do, and I don't see any major repercussions from it, or I can handle those repercussions.
Oh my god, I don't know what the heck is gonna go happen moving forward.
Yeah, like I have no idea what they're gonna do in season 2.
Yeah, so I have no idea where they're going season 2, which is great. But I'm also like, wait, how are they gonna do another Suicide Squad? Can they do another Suicide Squad? At this point, what the heck are we doing moving forward, and how are we doing it? And I love that from my stuff. Me personally, I'm gonna finish with another controversial take, and it's like, when watching, all these superhero shows, I haven't been nearly a fan of any of the shows, maybe except for Harley Quinn and Doom Patrol, where I'm watching, and like you're talking about Loki, WandaVision, Titans, The Flash, any of these, no matter what. There's not a single one of those shows where I'm finishing it and I look at it and say, I have no idea where this show is going to go from here, and I love that. But with this one, I was like, the ramifications of this like last 10 minutes, I have no idea what they're going to do, and I love that.
See, that's great. I agree with you entirely about the last 10 minutes of this particular show.
Just dropping the Suicide Task Force X reveal is like that fundamentally changes an entire film series going forward, and it fundamentally changes the dynamic of a lot of the characters in this show moving forward. And I was like, oh my god, how in the world are we gonna you can automatically see the threads that are being pulled, and that this is going to be some disastrous, like, big catastrophe moving forward, and I'm super interested.
Yeah, me too. And it like, I guess to finish this off and tie it back to the beginning, it's crazy that people who liked Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 and the Suicide Squad movie thought maybe that James Gunn wasn't going to be able to do a good job about this, because his track record is pretty solid so far.
Yeah,
like, I'm excited to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 when that eventually comes out. Now I'm excited to see the season 2 of this, and I hope to see a cool project of his in the future. I mean, sure, not everything lands perfectly. Like Brightburn, I guess, wasn't super great.
Well, that was his like brothers, wasn't it?
No, I thought it was. I thought he was the one in charge of that.
No, he like produced it, but I think it was like his brothers' like movie.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed parts of it, but James Gunn, as a director so far, and writer, producer, or creator, whatever, seems to be doing a great job, and I'm excited to see what comes up next from him.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's see what they do next.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Just Pick Something podcast. Check out the show on HBO Max streaming, and we're very much interested in seeing season 2.
Yeah, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think about the show and every movie that we talk about.
Yeah, comment if you hate our opinions or like our opinions.
Yeah, and what superhero rumor do you want to hear from next?
I mean, a Blue Beetle rumor would be pretty funny.
I feel like Booster Gold would be like a perfect character for them to make fun of, because he's obviously like a joke character already to begin with. So I would love them to be like, all right, cool. Did you know that Booster Gold, don't invest in booster shots? It's just a Ponzi scheme. It's a pyramid scheme, I swear.
or see, I was thinking more easy, like the Flash being like, I hear that dude has severe rashes.
Oh yeah, that man steals medical grade rash cream.
He steals baby powder from local supermarkets.
Yeah. When he runs, you get covered in like white dust. And someone's just like walking out their house and just go.
And they're just like, what the fuck is this powder? Okay. The intro and outro song for this podcast is VHS Dreams by Sean Ivers. Link in the description. Thanks for listening, and until next time.